Aries, if you are watching these very first seconds, please trust me on this. The message coming tomorrow, on the 12th, is not reaching you by accident. There are certain pieces of news that don't arrive to scare us, and they don't come to punish anyone. They arrive to see whether we have grown enough to look straight at the truth. And Aries, you are the kind of soul that cannot live forever in avoidance. This video was not created to create anxiety, not to make you feel uneasy. It exists to help you understand why at this exact moment, a difficult message is knocking on your life's door, and more importantly, what you need to do so you don't miss the turning point that destiny is quietly opening for you. In astrology, Aries is guided by Mars, the planet of action, of truth, of direct confrontation. When Mars is strongly activated, especially around dates like the 12th, things that have been delayed can no longer remain silent. News that arrives at this time is rarely something you can ignore, because it speaks directly to the direction your future depends on. If you are ready to face the truth the universe is sending your way, leave a small confirmation for yourself. A comment is not just words, it's how you step into the energetic current that is guiding Aries toward maturity and real success. Because sometimes the hardest part is not the message itself, but the moment we realize we can no longer pretend we didn't hear it. And to understand why the 12th carries such weight for Aries, we need to look deeper into the astrological nature that has shaped who you are from the very beginning. Aries, some souls are not born with the privilege of moving slowly. From your very first steps, your heartbeat has followed a different rhythm than the rest of the world. Not because you are rushed, not because you lack patience, but because if you don't step forward first, no one else opens the road. In the Zodiac wheel, your position is not a title. It is a quiet responsibility. You stand where everything begins, where there are no footprints, where no one can tell you what the right way forward looks like. There is something few people ever say to Aries, but you feel it deep inside. When you realize something, when you know, you are rarely wrong. That knowing isn't loud. It doesn't demand proof right away, but it shows up clearly, like a gentle pressure in your chest, like a feeling you simply cannot ignore. And because you stand at the starting point, these signals reach you earlier, not to make you anxious, but because if they arrived later, the cost would be far greater. Mars, your ruling planet, does not operate through hesitation. Mars doesn't wait until everyone else is ready. Mars only cares about timing, and when the timing is right, that energy doesn't ask whether you want to hear it or not. It simply arrives. That's why there are periods in your life when you feel pushed forward, even while part of you wants to stay where you are. Not because you're not strong enough to remain, but because staying would mean betraying what you already know. You've probably felt this more than once. Everything on the outside still looks fine. Others think nothing serious is happening, but inside you, something has shifted. A single sentence, a look, a small detail everyone else overlooks. and suddenly you can't sleep. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You try to calm yourself by saying, "Let's wait a little longer." But the longer you wait, the clearer the feeling becomes, until one day, the message no longer comes as intuition. It arrives as an event, a statement, a piece of news you cannot ignore. Aries is not someone who enjoys drama. On the contrary, you are deeply honest with life. You prefer clarity, transparency, clean endings. And yet, because of that very nature, you often endure far longer than necessary, simply because you don't want to disrupt surface peace. Few people realize that behind your decisiveness is a heart that truly doesn't want to hurt anyone. And sometimes, that is exactly what makes you delay naming the truth, even when you see it clearly. In astrology, the one who stands at the front doesn't have the option to walk behind. You can't wait to see what others will do first. If you don't move, the entire current behind you stalls. That's why the universe places you in situations where doing nothing is already a choice, and often the most painful one. You may not like that role, but you cannot escape it. There is a kind of exhaustion only Aries understands. The exhaustion of having to be strong, even when you need rest. Of appearing certain, while quietly questioning your direction. Of knowing that if you don't speak up, no one else will. And sometimes, because you've carried this role for so long, others forget that you are human too, that you sometimes want to be guided. To hear someone say, "It's okay, just wait a little." But Mars doesn't allow you to live in that space forever. Mars does not allow a truth that is already clear to be stretched endlessly. When Mars is strongly activated, especially around moments like the 12th, it feels like a firm knock on the door. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. It tells you it's time to face this. And facing it doesn't always mean acting immediately. Sometimes it simply means stopping the self-deception. Many Aries have told me that the most painful part wasn't the difficult message, but realizing they had seen it long before. They hurt because they tried to believe things would fix themselves. They hurt because they told themselves, "Maybe I'm overreacting." But the truth is, Aries' intuition rarely speaks nonsense. It only speaks truths you may not want to hear yet. If you're here now, listening to these words, you may be standing at a familiar crossroads, a place where you know you can't continue as before, but you don't yet know where you're going next. And it is in that quiet space that the message begins to form. It doesn't come to force a choice. It comes to make sure you don't keep moving unconsciously, because for Aries, moving without awareness is the most dangerous thing of all. Not because you're weak, but because you are powerful enough that choosing the wrong direction has real consequences. Some people are allowed to live in uncertainty for a long time. They only realize the truth after everything collapses. But with you, there is almost always a warning, not to scare you, but to give you time to adjust while you still can. And this is something many Aries realize later. Knowing early is not a burden, If you learn how to listen without punishing yourself, you don't have to explain why you feel this way. You don't have to prove that your intuition is correct. What matters is that you don't turn your back on it. You may choose to wait, but let it be a conscious waiting, not an escape. The moment you can tell the difference, you step into a very different level of maturity. If these words feel like they're speaking directly to you, pause for a moment. You don't need to do anything. Just acknowledge that you've heard this. You can leave a small sign for yourself, a quiet confirmation that you're no longer ignoring this feeling. Not to change everything right now, but to open the door for clarity to enter. When Aries acknowledges the truth, energy begins to move. You may not yet know what the message of the 12th is connected to, but notice this one thing: it won't speak about everything in your life. It will touch only one very specific area, the place you've been trying to keep unchanged for far too long. And because it is so specific, you will recognize it immediately when it appears. No explanation needed, no extra signs required. You will know. If these words resonate with you, please share this video. Somewhere, another Aries may be experiencing the same feeling, believing they're the only one going through this. And in the comments, you don't need to tell your story. You don't need to explain anything. Just leave a small sign, a quiet indication that you were someone who recognized the truth earlier than others. Your presence alone might be the confirmation someone else has been waiting for, because the message that's coming is not meant to scare you. It's here to remind you that you were not born to walk through life in uncertainty. And when you're ready to look straight ahead, the path in front of you will begin to reveal itself. But before we go any further, before we touch the exact area this message is pointing toward, allow yourself to stay with this feeling a little longer, because from here, the real story begins. Aries, some messages do not arrive like lightning. They don't come as major events. They don't appear in the form we imagine. They arrive quietly, sometimes as a conversation that seems ordinary, a short email, a document that needs to be signed, a sentence spoken without intention. And it's precisely this quiet arrival that makes the message more difficult, because it leaves you no place to hide. It doesn't allow you to say, "Not yet." It shows up at the exact moment. You already know the truth, but haven't been ready to admit it. In astrology, when Mars and Mercury are activated together, energy no longer stays in thought. It moves into real life, into words, into news, into conversations, into concrete decisions. Mars carries the drive to face things directly. Mercury carries the truth that must be spoken. When these two energies meet, what has been held back can no longer remain in the shadows. Not to create chaos, but to release what has been trapped. For Aries, this is especially clear. You are not afraid of truth. What exhausts you is living in a suspended state, where everything appears fine on the surface, but inside, it isn't. You can handle pressure. You can handle hardship. You can handle heavy responsibility. What you struggle with is prolonged ambiguity. It drains your energy slowly, quietly, so subtly that sometimes you don't even realize why you feel so tired. This message may touch your work, not necessarily loss or collapse, but a truth about your role, your responsibility, your position. Perhaps you've been carrying too much without saying a word. Perhaps you're standing in a place that no longer reflects who you've become. Maybe your mission there ended long ago, yet you stayed out of habit, out of obligation, or out of fear of disappointing others. And then a piece of news arrives that forces you to look directly at it. Or perhaps the message touches a relationship, not necessarily separation, not necessarily conflict. Sometimes it's simply the moment. You realize the balance has shifted. You're giving more than you're receiving. The silence between you is no longer peace. It's distance. You've tried to understand. You've tried to compromise. You've tried to wait. But deep inside, you know something is no longer right. That truth has been there for a long time. It just hasn't been named. There are decisions Aries postpones, not because of a lack of courage, but because you understand consequences. You know that once truth is named, things can never return to how they were. And you're not impulsive. You don't want change, just to satisfy a passing emotion. You wait for a sign that is clear enough, mature enough, honest enough to know you're acting from awareness, not impulse. This message carries that sign. It doesn't force you to react immediately, but it no longer allows you to pretend you haven't seen what you've seen. It arrives as a pause, a moment where you must admit that your current state is draining you more than you realized, not through dramatic pain, but through slow erosion. And that is what Aries dislikes most, being depleted in silence. You were not born to live like that. You were born to act, to move forward, to create real movement in your life and in the lives of others. But action doesn't always mean a big step. Sometimes the strongest action is speaking the one sentence you've kept inside for too long, admitting to yourself that something needs to change, even if you don't yet know where that change will lead. You may ask yourself, why is this message coming now? Why not earlier or later? But astrology is never random. Moments like this arrive when you've gathered enough experience, enough understanding, enough inner maturity to avoid acting from fear. If it came earlier, you might have reacted too quickly. If it came later, you might have lost too much energy. Now it arrives to open a door you are finally ready to approach. Even if your emotions are still mixed, there is something subtle in how the universe speaks to Aries. It doesn't circle endlessly. It doesn't rely on vague signs forever. When the time comes, the message is clear enough that you don't need to overthink it. You will know. That knowing isn't loud, but it is solid, and that certainty is exactly why you can't ignore it. This message is not here to hurt you. It's here to end a state that has quietly drained your energy. It carries no punishment, only release. But every release requires a moment of facing, and that moment, no matter how gentle, demands absolute honesty with yourself. You don't need to explain this to anyone. You don't need to speak immediately. What matters most is that you stop turning away from what you already know. Silence, when held for too long, becomes a form of inner violence. And Aries, you were not born to endure in silence. You were born to live in truth, even when that truth leads you into a new chapter. If, as you listen, your heart softens for a moment, that is not a bad sign. It means you're touching something real. You may not yet have the courage to name it out loud, but recognizing its presence is already a powerful step. Sometimes the universe only needs you to reach that point, not to run ahead just yet. Ask yourself, gently, is there something in your life you've known for a long time, but haven't been ready to name? You don't need an answer now. You don't need a conclusion. Just allow the question to exist within you. And if these words resonate, leave a small sign for yourself in the comments. Not to explain, not to tell your story, but to confirm that you've heard this message. When Aries acknowledges the truth, energy begins to move. When you stop ignoring it, the universe no longer needs to speak louder. And that is the heart of this difficult message. It doesn't ask you to do something big right away. It only asks you to pause, to look straight ahead and not turn away. And very soon, you'll understand why this message cannot be ignored. Not because it is overwhelming, but because if you continue to avoid it, the cost will no longer be as gentle as it is right now. And that is what we need to talk about next. Aries, there is something very unique about your energy that not everyone understands. You can endure a great deal, but you were never born to endure forever. Mars, your ruling planet, is not the energy of avoidance. It is the fire of action, of truth placed in the right place, at the right time. And when Mars speaks, silence is no longer neutral. It begins to accumulate. Some people can ignore signals for a long time without anything happening right away. But for Aries, that is rarely the case. When you ignore something, you already recognize clearly. The energy doesn't disappear. It gathers, it compresses, and then, at some point, it finds a way out. Stronger, more sudden, more painful. Not because the universe wants to punish you, but because Mars does not allow truth to be buried for too long. You may have felt this before. At first, it's only a faint intuition, a vague discomfort, a passing thought you brush aside. Then the signs repeat. The same theme, the same feeling, and you keep telling yourself, not yet, just a little longer. Everything will be fine. Until one day, instead of a small signal, you receive a hard impact, a direct statement, an unexpected event, a truth revealed in a way you can no longer control. This is how Mars operates. It always offers earlier chances to face things, softer ones, quieter ones. But if those chances are ignored, it returns with greater intensity, not to threaten, but to ensure that truth finally takes its rightful place. For Aries, this is not punishment. It is energetic law. Perhaps what hurts most is not the final shock, but realizing you saw it coming. That if you had stopped sooner, looked sooner, things might have unfolded differently. I've seen many Aries move through that moment, not in weakness, but in deep awakening. They realize their intuition was never wrong. They were only wrong to try to ignore it. You were not born to live in constant alert mode. You were not born to stay forever in waiting to see what happens. Mars did not create you to be a passive observer in your own life. Mars created you to act when the time arrives, and that time is not when everything has already collapsed, but when you've seen enough signs to know that continued silence will cause more harm than facing the truth. There is something very subtle here. Facing the truth does not mean reacting impulsively. It does not mean creating drama or pushing everything to extremes. Facing the truth through mature Mars energy means first being honest with yourself. It means no longer telling yourself that you're overthinking, no longer using patience as an excuse to delay a decision that is already ripe. When you ignore the truth, the energy doesn't just build inside you, it spreads outward. It affects how you speak, how you react, how you fall silent. Others may not understand why you seem more irritable, more tired, more distant. But deep down, you know exactly why. It's the result of living too long out of alignment with your own truth, and Mars will not allow that misalignment to continue indefinitely. Aries, you can handle hardship, you can handle responsibility, but what you cannot endure is living in a state of misalignment that remains unnamed. That is why, when this message arrives, you feel unable to ignore it, not because you are weaker than others, but because you are more sensitive to truth. And sensitivity to truth is a powerful strength. Even when it's uncomfortable, some people choose avoidance to preserve surface peace. But for you, that peace is always temporary, because Mars does not allow you to build your life on an unclear foundation. Sooner or later, you are brought back to the point that requires facing, and each time you return, the energy is stronger than before, not to hurt you more, but to prevent you from continuing down the wrong path. If you're listening now, and something feels deeply familiar, that is not random. You may be standing at a threshold where ignoring the truth is no longer a safe option, not because everything is about to collapse, but because continued delay would cost more than facing it now. Mars always offers a choice. Face it early, with lower intensity, or face it later, with greater force. You don't need to fear this. Facing things early always brings less damage. It gives you agency. It gives you space to choose a response that preserves your dignity. Avoidance, on the other hand, only prolongs pain for you and for others who are unknowingly pulled into that unresolved space. Mars doesn't only protect you, it protects the truth for everyone involved. If at this point your heart feels heavy, remember, that feeling is not a bad sign. It means you are close to the truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable at first, always releases trapped energy. When energy is released, movement becomes possible. And Aries, you are the sign of movement, not stagnation. If this message resonates with you, please like and share this video. There may be many people out there who need to hear that facing the truth is not failure, but a very quiet form of courage. And in the comments, you don't need to tell your story. Just leave a small sign that you've heard this message. When many Aries acknowledge together, the field of clarity grows stronger. And ultimately, what matters most is not what the news turns out to be. It's how you respond. When truth stands in front of you, that is where your path begins to turn in a completely new direction. Aries, once the message has arrived, the hardest part is no longer what it says. It's how you stand in front of it. Not running, not resisting, not rushing to decide. Just standing still, standing grounded, allowing the truth to move fully through you. Your first instinct has always been action. When a signal appears, you want to move immediately, speak immediately, fix it immediately. You're used to being decisive, to charging forward, as if being faster will solve everything. But mature Mars is not impulsive Mars. Mature Mars knows when to pause, so it doesn't injure itself. This message is not asking you to be stronger. It's asking you to be more conscious. And for Aries, that can be harder than battle itself. The first thing you need to do when the message arrives is to listen fully. Don't interrupt. Don't filter it through old fears. Don't rush to assign a familiar ending. Just listen with your ears and with your entire body. Sometimes truth doesn't hurt immediately. Instead, it creates a gentle emptiness, an unusual stillness, as if something has finally been placed where it belongs after being displaced for far too long. Let that feeling stay long enough for you to understand what it's trying to tell you. Aries often finds it difficult to stay in silence. Silence can make you feel as if you're losing control. But this time, silence is not weakness. It is a safe space, a buffer zone, a place that keeps you from reacting through old wounds. When you react too quickly, you're often acting from self-protection, not from truth. And you already know this. There are some actions that cannot be taken back, no matter how much we explain afterward. Not reacting immediately doesn't mean you're ignoring the situation. It means you respect yourself enough not to turn an important moment into a rushed decision. You may feel a strong urge to say everything, to cut things off, to leave, or to do something decisive, just to end the discomfort. But mature Mars does not ask you to act forcefully. It asks you to act correctly. Correct here means protecting your dignity, protecting the truth, protecting your self-respect. Aries, you can walk through many storms with your head held high, but only if you don't betray yourself in the moment that matters most. Some choices bring immediate relief, but leave long aftershocks, and some choices require you to endure a little longer, yet preserve who you are on the other side of the story. The true strength of Aries is not in reacting quickly. It is in standing steady. When the truth is revealed, standing steady does not mean becoming rigid. It means not allowing emotional waves to pull you away from what you know is right. It means not letting anger speak for you, not letting fear lead your decisions. You may feel many emotions at once: sadness, anger, disappointment, relief, even a sense of release. All of it is valid. What matters is that you don't act while those emotions are still competing for control. Give them space to settle. When emotions quiet down, truth speaks much more clearly. You may not yet know what you'll do next, and that is completely okay. You don't need an answer right now. Mature Mars understands that not every battle requires immediate charge. Sometimes the wisest choice is to hold your ground, observe, and wait for the fog to lift. Not because you're afraid, but because you respect the process. Aries often carries the role of a leader, whether you ask for it or not. Others watch how you act to decide how they will act. When you choose conscious action, you don't just protect yourself. You quietly set a new standard for those around you. A standard of courage without harm. A standard of responsibility without emotional violence. You may not realize it, but every time you speak truth calmly, every time you choose not to hurt, even when you could, you create a powerful ripple. Society does not lack fast reactors. It lacks people who are willing to pause, to reflect, and to act from clarity. And that is a role mature Aries can step into naturally. If this message involves a relationship, ask yourself this: do you want to leave in anger or leave with integrity? If it involves work, ask, do you want to protect your ego or protect your long-term values? These are not easy questions, but they lead you to choices you won't feel ashamed of later. Some people may not understand your decision. They may think you're too harsh or too gentle, but what matters most is not what they think. What matters is that when you're alone, when no one is watching, you can say, you acted in alignment with your truth. Mars does not ask you to be liked. Mars asks you to be respected. First, by yourself. In this moment, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to defeat anyone. You only need not to lose yourself. There are victories that are loud, but leave emptiness behind. And there are victories that are quiet, yet allow you to sleep peacefully. For the first time in a long while, Aries, you deserve that peace. If you must choose between short-term comfort and long-term growth, allow yourself to choose the path that helps you grow, even if it feels uncomfortable right now. Growth is not always applauded, but it always brings a kind of freedom that temporary comfort never can. Let me know in the comments if you've ever stood before a choice like this. You don't need to explain. One line is enough. When you speak it, even briefly, you acknowledge that you're ready to live differently. And if these words resonate, please share this video. There may be another Aries who needs to hear that pausing does not mean weakness. It means strength. at a deeper level, because it is in moments like these that something very important begins to awaken within you, a capacity you never needed before, a level of strength that doesn't come from muscle or reflex, but from clarity and self-respect. And this is when the deeper talent of Aries begins to awaken. Aries, there is a very special moment on your journey that not everyone recognizes right away. It is the moment after the wave has passed, after the difficult message has been faced, after you stop reacting from old instincts. In that moment, Mars within you is no longer a wild flame. It becomes a steady light, deeper, more stable, and powerful in a very different way. In advanced astrology, Mars is not only the planet of battle, Mars is also the planet of direction. When a soul passes through a challenge without losing itself, Mars energy is upgraded. It stops searching for enemies to fight and begins searching for paths to lead. And this is the shift many Aries don't realize they've already stepped into. You may think you're simply trying to survive a hard phase, but from the universe's perspective, you've just completed a very quiet training. No applause, no ceremony, only an inner change in how you see, how you listen, and how you choose to act. And that change is the clearest sign that you are ready for a new role. The greatest Aries I've ever met share one thing in common. They didn't become great because they always won. They became great because they listened to messages that were difficult to hear, at times that were deeply uncomfortable, and they did not turn away. Those messages slowed them down, deepened them, and made them far more trustworthy in the eyes of others. There is a profound difference between someone who reacts strongly and someone who leads. The strong reactor creates short-term movement. The guide creates long-term direction. And Aries, after everything you've just been through, you no longer belong in the role of reaction. You've seen the cost of impulsiveness too clearly. You've understood the consequences of acting from anger too deeply. And because of that understanding, you now carry yourself in a different way. You may start to notice this through very small changes. You no longer feel the need to argue just to prove you're right. You no longer need to win every conversation. You begin to care more about what comes after, not just how something feels in the moment. And whether you name it or not, this is the sign that a form of spiritual leadership is beginning to take shape. A true guide is not the one who speaks the most. They are the one who makes others feel safe in their presence, not because they always have the answers, but because they are not afraid of truth. When Aries learns to stand firmly in their own truth, you naturally become a point of stability for others. No effort required, no performance, simply through how you show up. This world does not lack people who act quickly. What it truly needs are those who know when to pause, who choose clarity over anger, who take responsibility for the impact they have on others. And that is why your journey has never been pointless. What you've just lived through was not only for you, It has been shaping you into someone who can open paths without creating more harm. You may not call yourself a leader. You may think you're simply trying to live more honestly, more truthfully, with fewer mistakes. But spiritual leadership rarely begins with a title. It begins when one person dares to face truth first, so others can face it later. It begins when someone chooses awareness over anger and uses clarity to light the way forward. You may see this more clearly soon. People may begin coming to you for guidance, not because you speak better, but because you don't avoid hard conversations. Not because you're perfect, but because you've walked through your own imperfection. And in a world driven by reaction, your calm presence becomes a rare form of strength. Perhaps the message of the 12th did not come to test you the way you once believed. Perhaps it came to confirm that you are ready for a role that is larger, deeper, and more impactful. Not a role above others, but a role where you stand steady so others can lean in safely. And that is a beautiful responsibility, even when it isn't light. You do not need to change who you are to step into this role. You only need to remain honest with what you've learned, to keep choosing conscious action, to speak truth without causing harm, to walk forward with your self-respect intact. Mars within you will no longer push you into meaningless battles. It will guide you toward places where you can truly make a difference. If, at this point, you feel a deep stillness inside, trust that this is a good sign. It is the quiet of reorganization, of one chapter closing and another beginning to form, not loudly, not urgently, but with certainty. And as we come to a close, I want to say this to you. Aries, you did not walk this path to become harder. You walked it to become clearer, not to fight more, but to lead more wisely. And if this message reached you at this exact moment, it is not coincidence. It is confirmation that you are ready to stand where very few have the courage to stand. Aries, before we truly close, allow me to say something from a very deep place. Thank you for staying until the end. Not everyone has the patience to listen to a message that isn't easy to hear. Not everyone has the courage to sit quietly with their own truth. The fact that you are still here, still listening, says a great deal about your inner strength. A quiet strength, a steady strength, a very real one. In astrology, some messages arrive as warnings, others arrive as awakenings, but this one arrives as confirmation. Difficulty is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It is a doorway, showing that you've come far enough to step into a new level. And Aries, from the moment you were born, you were a pioneer, not a follower, not a bystander, but the one who steps forward when the road is still undefined. If this message found you, it's not because you are weak. It's because the universe knows you are strong enough not to turn away from truth, strong enough to remain standing as layers fall away, strong enough to choose awareness over anger. And that is something not every soul can do. If you are ready to walk through the door. This message has opened. Leave a confirmation for yourself. A comment is not just text. It is how you tell the universe, I am ready, ready to see clearly, ready to change, ready to live as who I truly am now. When you confirm, energy begins to move in a new direction. And if this video touched you, please like and share it. Not for algorithms, but because somewhere another Aries needs this message to know they are not alone. Every share spreads clarity, courage, and positive energy to those standing at the same threshold. Thank you for trusting this space, for allowing these words to enter your inner world. Your presence here has meaning. It is part of a larger cycle, now coming to completion. And don't leave just yet. In the next video, we'll speak about a very quiet talent within Aries, one that awakens only after walking through messages like this. A talent that can transform not only how you live, but how you influence the world around you.